The Hollowfangs Malediction. Celine Vex never believed the old stories, the ones that warned of a forgotten king buried beneath the ruins of Black Hollow. But when she stepped into the abandoned temple, the air cracked with energy. The torches blazed to life. The ground trembled beneath her feet. And then a voice low, rich, edged with something ancient spoke from the darkness. "You woke me," the man murmured, stepping into the dim light, his silver eyes gleaming. "And now you belong to me." Chapter 1. The Whispers of Black Hollow. The air in Black Hollow was always thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a fragrance that clung to Celine Vex's clothes and hair long after she'd left the woods. It was a familiar scent, one she'd known since childhood, growing up in the shadow of the crumbling ruins that gave the place its name. But tonight, the familiar held an undercurrent of something else, something electric and unsettling. Celine, at 57, felt the years etched onto her face, a roadmap of laughter and loss. Her silver-streaked brown hair was pulled back in a practical braid, revealing the fine lines around her hazel eyes, eyes that had seen too much grief in the last few decades. The loss of her husband, Thomas, 5 years ago, had left a hollow ache in her chest, a void that she filled with the quiet routines of her life, tending her small herb garden, running the town's quaint bookstore, and taking solitary walks in the woods. Black Hollow. The locals whispered stories about it, tales of a forgotten king, a powerful sorcerer named Lycan, cursed and buried beneath the ruins. They said his spirit still roamed the woods, a restless entity bound to the land. Celine, a woman of practicality and reason, had always dismissed them as folklore, the ramblings of old women and bored teenagers. Yet, tonight, as she stood before the crumbling entrance of the ancient temple, a shiver danced down her spine. She'd come to the hollow seeking a rare herb, moon petal, said to bloom only under the full moon near places of ancient power. Her best friend, Martha, had been suffering from a persistent cough, and Celine, ever the caregiver, was determined to find a remedy. Martha, with her fiery red hair and even furious spirit, was the closest thing Celine had to family these days. The moon, a silver disk hanging high in the inky sky, cast long, skeletal shadows from the surrounding trees. The temple entrance, a gaping maw of broken stone, seemed to exhale a cold, earthy breath. Hesitation warred with determination. Moon petal was rare, precious. Martha needed her. Taking a deep breath, Celine stepped across the threshold. The moment her foot landed on the worn stone floor, the air shifted. It crackled with an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She stumbled, her hand reaching out to steady herself against a moss-covered wall. As her fingers brushed the stone, a wave of dizziness washed over her, followed by a strange, almost exhilarating feeling. Then, the torches flared to life. Not the gentle flicker of a newly lit flame, but a sudden, violent burst of light that illuminated the vast chamber in a wash of orange and gold. Celine gasped, shielding her eyes. The torches, ancient and seemingly untouched for centuries, burned with an unnatural intensity, casting dancing shadows on the walls, revealing intricate carvings that depicted scenes of wolves, battles, and a figure that seemed to dominate them all, a man with piercing eyes and a crown of thorns. The ground beneath her feet trembled. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, growing in intensity until it felt like the very earth was groaning in protest. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Celine, her heart hammering against her ribs, pressed herself against the wall, fear clawing at her throat. And then a voice. Low, rich, edged with something ancient and undeniably powerful, it resonated from the darkness at the far end of the chamber. "You woke me," the voice murmured, the sound sending a shiver of both fear and something else, something akin to fascination, through Celine. Slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows. He moved with a grace that was both fluid and predatory, like a wild animal stalking its prey. As he stepped into the pool of light cast by the torches, Celine's breath caught in her throat. He was tall, strikingly so, with broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build that was evident even beneath the dark, seemingly ancient clothing he wore. His hair was the color of raven's wings, falling to his shoulders in thick waves. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were silver, luminous in the dim light, and they seemed to pierce through her, seeing not just her physical form, but the very depths of her soul. A face that might have belonged to a fallen angel, breathtakingly beautiful, yet touched by a haunting melancholy, completed the image. He looked to be in his late 30s, yet his eyes held the weight of centuries. "And now," he said, his voice a silken whisper that somehow filled the vast chamber, "you belong to me." Celine, usually so composed, so grounded, found herself speechless. Her mind, usually a bastion of logic and reason, struggled to reconcile what she was seeing with any semblance of reality. This was impossible. A dream? A hallucination brought on by the strange atmosphere of the ruins? She tried to speak, to demand an explanation, but her voice caught in her throat. All she could manage was a shaky, Who are you?" The man smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips that did nothing to reassure her. "I am Lycaon," he said, the name echoing the whispers of the old stories. "King of this land. And you, little mortal, have trespassed upon my domain." His gaze swept over her, assessing, possessive. Celine felt a strange pull, a magnetic force drawing her towards him, even as every instinct screamed to her to flee. The air around him thrummed with power, a palpable energy that both terrified and captivated her. She was caught, trapped between the primal fear of the unknown and a burgeoning, inexplicable curiosity. This man, this being, was dangerous. She knew it instinctively. Yet, she couldn't deny the strange, unsettling allure he possessed. He took a step closer, and Celine instinctively flinched back, her hand flying to the small, silver wolf pendant she always wore, a gift from Thomas. The cool metal against her skin was a grounding touch, a reminder of the life she knew, the life that suddenly felt a million miles away. Lycaon paused, his silver eyes narrowing slightly as he noticed the gesture. "A wolf," he murmured, his voice taking on a softer, almost curious tone. "You are the symbol of my people." "My people?" Celine's mind reeled. The stories, they weren't just stories, were they? This man, this Lycaon, he was real. The forgotten king, the cursed sorcerer, he was standing right in front of her. He reached out, his long, elegant fingers brushing against her cheek. Celine held her breath, her body frozen, unable to move, unable to break the strange, magnetic hold he had on her. His touch was surprisingly gentle, sending a shiver of warmth through her, a warmth that was at odds with the cold fear that still gripped her heart. "You have a scent," he whispered, his voice close to her ear, "of the moon and the earth, of sorrow and strength, a scent that calls to me." He leaned closer, his silver eyes locking with hers, and Celine felt herself drowning in their depths. She was lost, adrift in a sea of ancient magic and forbidden desire. This was madness. She had to escape. She had to get back to Martha, to the safety of her ordinary life. But as she looked into those mesmerizing eyes, she knew, with a chilling certainty, that her life would never be ordinary again. A heavy chain, unseen but undeniably present, seemed to connect them. The weight of it settled deep in her heart. Chapter 2. The Awakening of Shadows. The touch lingered, a ghost of warmth on Celine's cheek, a stark contrast to the icy dread pooling in her stomach. Lycaon's silver eyes, pools of liquid moonlight, held her captive, a silent command in their depths that kept her rooted to the spot. The scent of him, a heady mix of ancient stone, pine needles, and something wilder, something untamed, filled her senses, both alluring and terrifying. "Let me go," Celine finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling despite her efforts to sound firm. The words felt feeble, inadequate against the sheer presence of the man before her. Lycaon's lips curved in a slow, enigmatic smile. "Let you go?" he repeated, the words laced with a hint of amusement. "But you have only just arrived. And you have a debt to pay, little mortal, for disturbing my slumber." His voice, though soft, held an undercurrent of steel, a reminder of the power that simmered beneath his seemingly calm exterior. Celine's mind raced, desperately searching for a way out, a logical explanation for the impossible situation she found herself in. This couldn't be real. This had to be some elaborate, terrifying dream. "I didn't mean to disturb you," she stammered, her gaze darting around the chamber, searching for an escape route. "I was just looking for an herb." Lycaon chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that echoed through the ruins. "An herb? You brave the dangers of Black Hollow, awaken an ancient king from his centuries-long sleep, all for a mere herb?" He tilted his head, his silver eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and something that looked suspiciously like mockery. Celine straightened her shoulders, drawing on a reserve of strength she didn't know she possessed. "It's important," she said, her voice gaining a little more steadiness. "My friend is ill." "Ill?" Lycaon repeated, his brow furrowing slightly. He seemed to consider this for a moment, his gaze shifting from Celine to the intricate carvings on the walls, as if searching for an answer within their ancient depictions. "And you believe this herb will cure her?" "It might," Celine said, clinging to the hope that had brought her here in the first place. "It's called moon petal. It's said to have healing properties." Lycaon's eyes snapped back to hers, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. "Moon petal," he murmured, the words sounding almost like a caress on his tongue. "A flower that blooms only under the full moon, near places of ancient power. A flower that is also known for its ability to enhance other abilities." He took a step closer, and Celine instinctively recoiled, pressing herself against the cold stone wall. The air between them crackled with an unseen energy, a palpable tension that made it hard to breathe. "What other abilities?" Celine asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lycaon's smile widened, revealing a hint of something sharp, something dangerous. "Abilities that lie dormant within certain bloodlines," he said, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on the silver wolf pendant that hung around her neck. "Abilities that have been forgotten, suppressed for centuries." He reached out, his fingers tracing the outline of the pendant. Celine flinched, but she couldn't break his gaze. His touch, though light, sent a jolt of energy through her, a strange, tingling sensation that spread through her veins like wildfire. "You are not like the others," he murmured, his voice low and intimate. "You have a spark, a flicker of the old magic within you. A magic that I can awaken." Celine's heart pounded against her ribs. This was madness. She was a bookstore owner, a gardener, a widow. She wasn't magical. She wasn't anything special. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, trying to sound defiant, but her voice betrayed her fear. Lycaon chuckled softly. "You will," he said, his eyes gleaming with a certainty that chilled her to the bone. "You will understand. And you will embrace it. Because now, you are bound to me." He raised his hand, and Celine saw a faint, silvery glow emanating from his palm. The air around them shimmered, and she felt a strange pulling sensation, as if an invisible force was drawing her closer to him. She tried to resist, to pull away, but her body wouldn't obey. What are you doing?" she gasped, her voice filled with panic. "I am claiming what is rightfully mine," Lycaon said, his voice a silken whisper. "The ancient laws are clear. You awaken me. You are mine." Celine felt a surge of anger, a spark of defiance that pushed back against the fear. "I am not yours," she cried. "I belong to no one." Lycaon's expression hardened, his silver eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce intensity. "You will learn, little mortal," he said, his voice low and menacing, "that defiance has consequences." The silvery glow intensified, and Celine felt a sharp, searing pain in her shoulder, as if she had been branded. She cried out, clutching at her arm, her vision blurring with tears. When she looked down, she saw a mark on her skin, a silvery, crescent-shaped symbol that seemed to glow faintly beneath her clothes. The mark of the wolf. The mark of Lycaon. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was trapped. bound to this ancient, powerful being, a prisoner in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The weight of her situation, the sheer impossibility of it all, threatened to crush her. But even in the face of such overwhelming despair, a flicker of hope remained. She was Celine Vex. She was a survivor. She had faced loss and grief, and she had emerged stronger. She would not be broken. She would find a way to escape. She would find a way to break this curse. As Lycaon watched her, a flicker of something that might have been respect crossed his features, only to vanish behind his mask of cold control. He lowered his hand, the silvery glow fading. The pain in her shoulder subsided to a dull throb. "Come," he said, his voice regaining its silken smoothness. "It is time you learned the truth about your heritage and your destiny." He gestured towards the dark depths of the temple, the shadows seeming to beckon her forward. And, despite her fear, despite her desperate desire to flee, Celine found herself following him, drawn into the darkness by an invisible force, a force that was both terrifying and strangely compelling. The temple floor seemed to shift beneath her feet as she moved, as if the very stones were acknowledging a new master and a new prisoner. Chapter 3. A Pact Forged in Darkness. The darkness swallowed Celine as she followed Lycaon deeper into the temple. The only light came from the flickering torches, which seemed to burn brighter, fueled by some unseen energy, as they passed. The air grew colder, heavier, laden with the scent of dust and decay, and the silence was broken only by the echo of their footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the unseen ceiling. Celine's senses were on high alert, every nerve ending tingling with a mixture of fear and a strange, unsettling anticipation. She kept her distance from Lycaon, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of being studied. His presence dominated the space, a palpable force that filled the ancient chamber. He moved with a silent grace, his footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. He seemed to know every twist and turn of the temple, navigating the labyrinthine corridors with an ease that spoke of long familiarity. Celine, on the other hand, felt completely lost, disoriented, her sense of direction thrown off by the oppressive atmosphere and the maze-like structure of the ruins. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice echoing in the stillness. She tried to keep her tone neutral, to betray none of the fear that churned within her. Lycaon glanced back at her, his silver eyes gleaming in the torchlight. "To a place where you can learn the truth," he said, his voice a low murmur. "A place where your ancestors once walked, where the secrets of your bloodline are revealed." His words sent a shiver down Celine's spine. Her ancestors? Secrets? What did he mean? She had always considered herself an ordinary woman, with a family history that was, as far as she knew, unremarkable. Her parents had been farmers, simple folk who had lived and died in the same small town she had always called home. "I don't understand," she said, her voice tinged with confusion. "My family were not special." Lycaon stopped, turning to face her fully. He studied her for a long moment, his silver eyes intense, searching. "You are more than you know, Celine Vex," he said, his voice softening slightly. "You carry within you the blood of the ancient ones, the blood of the lycanthropes, the wolf shifters." Celine stared at him, dumbfounded. Wolf shifters? Lycanthropes? It was the stuff of legends, of fairy tales. It couldn't be real. That's impossible," she stammered, shaking her head. "Werewolves, they're not real." Lycaon smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a chill down her spine. "Are you so sure?" he asked, his voice a silken whisper. "Look around you, Celine. Feel the energy of this place. This is not the realm of ordinary mortals. This is a place of magic, of ancient power, a place where the veil between worlds is thin." He gestured towards the walls, which were covered in intricate carvings depicting scenes of men transforming into wolves, of battles fought under the full moon, of rituals performed in the heart of the forest. Celine stared at the carvings, her mind struggling to reconcile what she was seeing with her rational, logical worldview. "The stories, the whispers of Black Hollow," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "They're true?" They are echoes of the truth, Lycaon said, his voice regaining its low, resonant tone. Fragments of a history that has been deliberately obscured, hidden from the eyes of the world. But the truth remains, buried deep within the earth, waiting to be awakened. He took a step closer, and Celine instinctively flinched, but she couldn't break his gaze. His silver eyes held her captive, a silent command in their depths that kept her rooted to the spot. You, Celine, he said, his voice a soft caress, are a descendant of that ancient lineage. You carry the wolf within you, dormant, waiting to be released. He reached out and touched the crescent-shaped mark on her shoulder, the mark he had inflicted upon her. Celine gasped, a sharp intake of breath, as a jolt of energy surged through her, a strange mixture of pain and something else, something that felt almost like recognition. This mark, Lycaon said, his fingers tracing the outline of the symbol, is a bond. A pact forged in darkness. It binds you to me, to my bloodline, to the ancient power of the lycanthropes. Celine's mind reeled. A bond? A pact? She was bound to this man, this werewolf, against her will? I don't want this, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. I didn't ask for this. Lycaon's expression hardened, his silver eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce intensity. You have no choice, he said, his voice low and menacing. The ancient laws are clear. You awaken me. You are mine. And you will fulfill your destiny. He turned and continued walking, his long strides eating up the distance. Celine hesitated for a moment, her mind racing, desperately searching for a way out. But the mark on her shoulder throbbed, a constant reminder of the bond that held her captive. And a strange, unsettling curiosity, a desire to understand the truth of his words, began to gnaw at her. With a sigh of resignation, she followed him, deeper into the heart of the ruins, deeper into the darkness, where the secrets of her past and the terrifying reality of her future awaited her. The weight of centuries, of a forgotten kingdom, settled heavily upon her. The whispers of Black Hollow had become a roar, a deafening truth she could no longer ignore. Chapter 4. Echoes of a Forgotten King. The chamber Lycaon led Celine to was vast and circular, the ceiling lost in shadows high above. A single shaft of moonlight pierced through a hole in the crumbling roof, illuminating a stone altar in the center of the room. The air here was thick with the scent of old magic, a palpable energy that made Celine's skin prickle. Carvings, even more intricate and detailed than those in the previous chamber, covered the walls, depicting scenes of a thriving, powerful kingdom, a kingdom ruled by wolves. Lycaon stood before the altar, his back to Celine, his silhouette stark against the moonlight. He seemed to be in a trance, his head bowed, his hands resting on the cold stone. Celine watched him, her heart pounding in her chest, a mixture of fear and a strange, unsettling fascination warring within her. This, Lycaon said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber, was the heart of my kingdom, the place where my power was at its strongest. He turned to face her, his silver eyes gleaming in the dim light. He looked different. Softer, somehow. Less predatory. There was a vulnerability in his expression that Celine hadn't seen before, a hint of sadness, of longing. Before the curse, he continued, his voice tinged with a bitterness that sent a shiver down Celine's spine. This land flourished. My people, the lycanthropes, lived in harmony with nature, drawing strength from the moon, from the earth, from the very essence of the wild. He gestured towards the carvings on the walls. We were not monsters, Celine, he said, his voice low and intense. We were protectors, guardians of the balance between the human world and the supernatural. Celine stared at the carvings, her eyes tracing the images of wolves and humans living side by side, of celebrations and rituals, of a society that seemed both powerful and peaceful. It was a far cry from the terrifying legends she had heard, the tales of bloodthirsty beasts and savage attacks. What would happen? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. What caused the curse? Lycaon's expression darkened, his silver eyes flashing with anger and pain. Betrayal, he said, his voice a low growl. Betrayal by those I trusted, by those who feared our power, by those who coveted our land. He began to pace, his movements restless, agitated. A coalition of human sorcerers, jealous of our strength, conspired against us. They used dark magic, a forbidden ritual, to trap me, to bind my spirit to this place, to turn my people against me. He stopped, his gaze fixed on Celine, his eyes filled with a burning intensity. They twisted the ancient ways, perverted the natural order, turning the gift of lycanthropy into a curse, a source of fear and hatred. Celine felt a pang of sympathy for him, a flicker of understanding amidst the fear that still gripped her heart. She could relate to betrayal, to the pain of loss, to the feeling of having your world turned upside down by forces beyond your control. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice sincere. Lycaon looked at her, surprised, as if he hadn't expected her empathy. He studied her for a long moment, his silver eyes searching, probing. "You are different," he said, his voice softening slightly. "You do not recoil from me in disgust. You do not see me as a monster." Celine shook her head. I don't know what to believe," she said, her voice honest. "But I see your pain, and I understand loss." A flicker of something that might have been gratitude crossed Lycaon's features, but it was quickly replaced by his usual mask of cold control. "The curse," he continued, his voice regaining its formal tone, "can only be broken by one of my bloodline, one who embraces the wolf within, one who is willing to wield the ancient power." He looked at Celine, his gaze intense, expectant. "You," he said, his voice a silken whisper, "are the key." Celine's heart skipped a beat. "Me? Break the curse?" She was just an ordinary woman, a widow, a bookstore owner. She wasn't a warrior, a sorceress, a hero. "I can't," she stammered, shaking her head. I'm not strong enough." Lycaon smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. "You are stronger than you think, Celine," he said, his voice a soft caress. "You have the blood of kings flowing through your veins. You have the power to reclaim your heritage, to restore your people, to break the curse that has haunted this land for centuries." He reached out and took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of energy through her, a strange, tingling sensation that spread through her veins like wildfire. Celine gasped, her breath catching in her throat. His grip was firm, but not painful, a silent reassurance, a promise of power. "I will teach you," he said, his voice low and intimate. "I will guide you. I will show you how to unlock the wolf within, how to harness the ancient magic that flows through your blood." Celine looked into his silver eyes, and she saw not just the ancient king, the cursed sorcerer, but also a glimmer of hope, a chance for redemption, a possibility of a future she had never imagined. The fear was still there, a constant undercurrent, but it was mingled with something else, a growing sense of purpose, a feeling of belonging, a connection to something ancient and powerful. She was terrified. She was intrigued. She was drawn to him. The ancient stones seemed to whisper around them, a chorus of forgotten voices urging her forward. Lycaon's hand tightened around hers, a silent pact sealed in the heart of the ruins. Whether she liked it or not, her destiny was now intertwined with his, with the curse of Black Hollow, with the fate of a forgotten kingdom. And, as she stared into the depths of his captivating eyes, she had the feeling that this might not, in fact, be such a bad thing after all. Or that, if it was, she would embrace it together. Chapter 5. The Scent of Midnight Rain. The following days, or rather, nights, as Lycaon insisted on conducting their lessons under the cover of darkness, were a blur of strange rituals, whispered incantations, and unsettling discoveries. Celine found herself drawn deeper and deeper into the world of Lycaon, a world of ancient magic, forgotten lore, and the constant, simmering presence of the wolf within. Lycaon was a demanding teacher, relentless in his pursuit of awakening Celine's dormant abilities. He pushed her, challenged her, forced her to confront her fears and her doubts. He taught her about the history of the lycanthropes, their connection to the moon, their ability to draw strength from the earth, their mastery of shape-shifting. He showed her how to listen to the whispers of the wind, how to feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet, how to sense the presence of other supernatural beings. He taught her ancient words of power, incantations that made the air crackle with energy, that sent shivers down her spine. But the most challenging and the most terrifying part of her training was the attempt to control the shift, the transformation from human to wolf. Lycaon insisted that it was a natural process, an instinctual response to the call of the moon, but for Celine, it felt like a violation, a loss of control, a surrender to something wild and untamed within her. The first few attempts were disastrous. She would feel a surge of energy, a burning sensation in her bones, a primal urge to run, to hunt, to howl at the moon. But the transformation wouldn't come. She would be left trembling, exhausted, her body aching, her mind filled with a terrifying sense of otherness. Lycaon was patient, but firm. He would stand beside her, his silver eyes watching her intently, his voice a low, soothing murmur, guiding her, encouraging her, pushing her to overcome her resistance. "You must embrace the wolf, Celine," he would say, his voice a silken whisper. "You must not fight it. You must surrender to it. It is a part of you, as natural as breathing, as natural as your heartbeat." One night, under the full moon, standing in the center of the ancient stone circle, Celine felt it again, the familiar surge of energy, the burning in her bones, the primal urge. But this time it was different. It was stronger, more intense, more irresistible. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She remembered Lycaon's words, his constant reminders to embrace the change, to surrender to the wolf. She let go of her fear, her resistance, her doubts. She opened herself to the power that surged within her, to the ancient magic that flowed through her veins. And then it happened. A wave of heat washed over her, a searing pain that ripped through her body. Her bones shifted, her muscles contorted, her skin stretched and tore. She cried out, a sound that was half human, half animal, a raw, guttural howl that echoed through the night. When she opened her eyes, she saw the world through a different lens. Her vision was sharper, her senses heightened, her body filled with a power she had never known before. She was on all fours, her paws digging into the soft earth, her fur the color of midnight, her eyes gleaming with a fierce, predatory light. She was a wolf. Lycaon stood before her, his human form radiating a quiet satisfaction. The moon bathed him in silver light, accentuating the sharp angles of his face, the intensity of his gaze. He knelt, extending a hand towards her, not in a gesture of command, but of acceptance. "Welcome, Celine," he said, his voice a low rumble, a sound that resonated deep within her wolf form. "Welcome to your true self." Celine, in her wolf form, hesitated for a moment, her instincts warring with her human memories. But then, she took a tentative step forward, drawn to Lycaon by an invisible force, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species, of human and animal. She nuzzled his hand, her wolf senses overwhelmed by his scent, the familiar mix of ancient stone, pine needles, and something wilder, something that now resonated with her own awakened nature. The scent of midnight rain clung to him, a fragrance that was both earthy and ethereal, both grounding and intoxicating. He stroked her fur, his touch gentle, reassuring. Celine leaned into his touch, a low growl rumbling in her chest, a sound of contentment, of belonging. For the first time since awakening this ancient power, she felt at peace. The transformation, though terrifying at first, had brought with it a sense of liberation, a release from the constraints of her human form, a connection to something primal, something ancient, something powerful. She was still Celine, but she was also more. She was a creature of the night, a child of the moon, a daughter of the wolf. And, under the watchful gaze of Lycaon, she began to explore the possibilities of her new, transformed self. A connection, primal and undeniable, sparked between them. It was a spark not of gentle affection, but of two wild souls recognizing each other in the moonlit darkness. Chapter 6. Beneath a Cursed Moon. The nights that followed Celine's first successful transformation were filled with a mixture of exhilaration and fear. She learned to navigate the world on four paws, to run through the moonlit forest with a speed and agility she had never imagined, to hunt with a primal instinct that both thrilled and disturbed her. Lycaon was her constant companion, her guide, her teacher. He taught her how to control her shifts, how to harness the power of the moon, how to communicate with other wolves, how to survive in the wild. He was patient, but demanding, pushing her to her limits, forcing her to confront her fears and her doubts. But their relationship was evolving beyond that of teacher and student. There was a growing connection between them, a bond that was forged not just by the ancient magic that bound them, but by a shared understanding, a mutual respect, a burgeoning attraction. Celine found herself drawn to Lycaon's strength, his intelligence, his unwavering determination. She admired his resilience, his ability to survive centuries of isolation and torment. She was captivated by his silver eyes, by the way they seemed to see into her soul, by the way they could shift from cold command to a warmth that made her heart flutter. And she sensed that he was drawn to her as well. She caught him watching her, his gaze lingering on her human form, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. She felt the brush of his hand against her fur, a touch that was more than just reassurance, a touch that sent shivers of awareness through her wolf body. One night, after a long run through the forest, they found themselves standing on a cliff overlooking the valley below. The moon, a silver disk hanging high in the inky sky, cast long, skeletal shadows from the surrounding trees. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, and the silence was broken only by the distant howl of a wolf. Celine, in her human form, leaned against a moss-covered rock, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was exhausted, but exhilarated, her body humming with the energy of the run. Lycaon stood beside her, his human form radiating a quiet power, a sense of ancient wisdom that both intrigued and intimidated her. "You are learning quickly, Celine," he said, his voice a low murmur. "You are embracing the wolf within you." Celine smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "It's amazing," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I never imagined I could feel this free." Lycaon nodded, his gaze fixed on the valley below. "Freedom is a precious gift," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "One that I have been denied for far too long." Celine looked at him, her heart aching for the pain she saw in his eyes. She wanted to reach out to him, to comfort him, but she hesitated, unsure of how he would react. "The curse," she said, her voice hesitant. "Is there really a way to break it?" Lycaon's expression hardened, his silver eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce intensity. "There is," he said, his voice low and determined. "But it will require sacrifice. It will require courage. It will require trust." He turned to face her, his gaze locking with hers. "You, Celine," he said, his voice a silken whisper, "are the key to my freedom. But you must trust me. You must believe in me. You must be willing to risk everything." Celine's heart pounded against her ribs. His words sent a shiver of both fear and excitement through her. She was drawn to him, to his power, to his intensity, but she was also afraid of him, of the ancient magic he wielded, of the unknown future that lay before them. I don't know," she stammered, shaking her head. It's a lot to ask." Lycaon stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his scent filling her senses. He reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "I know it is," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her breath catch in her throat. "But I believe in you, Celine. I see your strength, your courage, your heart. And I know that together, we can overcome this curse." His gaze lingered on her lips, and Celine felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to close the distance between them, to feel his kiss, to surrender to the desire that had been building within her. But she hesitated, fear warring with longing. What if we fail? She whispered, her voice trembling. Lycaon's thumbs gently stroked her cheeks, his touch sending shivers of awareness through her. Then we fail together, he said, his voice a low, husky murmur. But I do not believe we will. I have waited centuries for you, Celine. I will not let you go. He leaned closer, his silver eyes locking with hers, and Celine felt herself drowning in their depths. She was lost, adrift in a sea of ancient magic and forbidden desire. The cursed moon hung above them, a silent witness to their burgeoning connection, a connection that was both terrifying and inevitable. He lowered his head, his breath warm against her lips, and Celine closed her eyes, her heart pounding in anticipation. The moment was charged, fragile, and full of unspoken promises. But, just as his lips were about to brush against hers, a twig snapped in the nearby undergrowth. Lycaon stiffened, his head snapping up, his eyes narrowing. He pulled away from Celine, his body tense, alert. Someone is here, he said, his voice a low growl. Celine's heart sank. The moment was broken, the spell shattered. The fear returned, cold and sharp, reminding her of the danger they were in, of the forces that sought to keep them apart. They were not alone, and whoever was out there, hidden in the shadows, was likely not a friend. Chapter 7. The Unveiling of Secrets. The shadows of the forest seemed to deepen, the silence punctuated only by the rustling of leaves and the frantic beating of Celine's heart. Lycaon, his senses on high alert, scanned the surrounding trees, his body poised for action. He moved with a silent grace, a predator ready to defend his territory. Stay close, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the rustling wind. He placed himself between Celine and the perceived threat, a silent gesture of protection that both comforted and unnerved her. Celine, her own senses heightened by her recent transformation experiences, strained to hear any further sounds, to catch any glimpse of movement in the darkness. She felt a mixture of fear and a strange, unsettling excitement. She was still new to this world of magic and danger, but she was learning, adapting, growing stronger. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the trees, stepping into the moonlight. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark, rugged clothing. He carried a crossbow, the weapon gleaming menacingly in the dim light. His face was weathered and scarred, his eyes cold and hard, his expression set in a grim determination. A hunter. Lycaon growled, a low, guttural sound that sent a shiver down Celine's spine. He recognized the man, the scent of him, the aura of malice that surrounded him. Silas, Lycaon said, his voice laced with venom. I should have known. Silas, the hunter, smiled, a cruel, predatory smile that did nothing to reassure Celine. Lycaon, he said, his voice a low rasp. It's been a long time. What do you want, Silas? Lycaon asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. I want what I've always wanted, Silas said, his gaze shifting to Celine, his eyes narrowing with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. To rid the world of your kind. To finish what my ancestors started. He raised his crossbow, aiming it directly at Lycaon. Celine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She wanted to scream, to warn him, but her voice caught in her throat. And you, Silas said, his gaze lingering on Celine, you are a new addition. A human consorting with the beast. A traitor to your own kind. Celine straightened her shoulders, drawing on a reserve of courage she didn't know she possessed. I am not a traitor, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I am learning the truth. A truth that you and your ancestors have tried to suppress. Silas chuckled, a cold, mocking sound. The truth? You believe the lies of this monster? He is a creature of darkness, a cursed being who deserves to be eradicated. He is not a monster, Celine said, her voice gaining strength. He is a victim of betrayal, of hatred, of fear. Silas's expression hardened, his eyes flashing with anger. You are blinded by his magic, he said, his voice low and menacing. You are under his spell. But I will free you. I will save you from him. He tightened his grip on the crossbow, his finger on the trigger. Celine braced herself for the inevitable, her heart pounding in her chest. She was ready to fight, to defend Lycaon, to defend the truth she was beginning to understand. But before Silas could release the bolt, Lycaon moved. With a speed that defied human comprehension, he lunged forward, closing the distance between them in a heartbeat. He knocked the crossbow from Silas's hands, sending it flying into the darkness. Silas stumbled backward, surprised by Lycaon's sudden attack. He recovered quickly, drawing a long, silver knife from his belt. The knife gleamed menacingly in the moonlight, a symbol of the ancient feud between hunters and werewolves. "You may have caught me off guard, beast," Silas said, his voice a low growl, "but you will not defeat me. I am trained to kill your kind." "And I," Lycaon said, his voice a silken whisper, his silver eyes flashing with a fierce intensity, "am trained to survive." They circled each other, two predators locked in a deadly dance. The tension in the air was palpable, the silence broken only by the sound of their breathing and the rustling of leaves. Celine watched them, her heart in her throat, her mind racing. She wanted to help, to intervene, but she knew she was no match for the trained hunter. Suddenly, Silas lunged, his knife aimed at Lycaon's heart. Lycaon sidestepped the attack, his movements fluid and graceful. He grabbed Silas's wrist, twisting it with a force that made the hunter cry out in pain. The knife clattered to the ground. Lycaon, leveraging all his strength and speed, and years of pent-up frustration, threw Silas to the floor. Before he could react more, Lycaon was on top of him, pinning the hunter to the ground. His silver eyes burned, and he spoke, voice filled with ages of anger. "Tell me, hunter, what secrets do you hide? What truths have your order buried, to keep my people chained?" Silas, winded, glared. I will tell you nothing, beast. We shall see," Lycaon said, his voice now low and soothing, eerily different to the previous moment.
"We shall see."
He pressed his fingers to the hunter's temples. Silas stiffened. His eyes widened in a mix of pain and sudden shock. The hunter's face went slack, and memories not his own flooded Lycaon's mind. Celine watched, aghast, as Lycaon seemed to sift through Silas's very being, uncovering hidden truths, forgotten lore, and the dark secrets of the hunter's order. It was a violation, a forced unveiling, and it left her deeply shaken. The secrets of Black Hollow, it seemed, ran far deeper than she could ever have imagined. Chapter 8. A Touch of Forbidden Flame. The images that flooded Lycaon's mind through Silas were fragmented, distorted, like pieces of a shattered mirror. Yet, through the hunter's unwilling consciousness, a chilling narrative began to unfold. It was a story of deceit, manipulation, and a conspiracy that reached far beyond the simple feud between hunters and werewolves. Celine watched, her heart pounding in her chest, as Lycaon sifted through Silas's memories. She saw glimpses of ancient rituals, of secret meetings held in the dead of night, of a hidden order dedicated to controlling, not eradicating, supernatural power. The hunters, it seemed, were not merely protectors of humanity, but manipulators, seeking to harness the very magic they claimed to despise. And the curse on Lycaon, it was not a simple act of vengeance, but a carefully orchestrated plan to control him, to use him as a source of power, a living battery for their dark magic. Lycaon recoiled from Silas, his face contorted in disgust and rage. The hunter lay unconscious on the ground, his mind violated, his secrets exposed. Celine rushed to Lycaon's side, her concern overriding her fear. "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What did you see?" Lycaon shook his head, his silver eyes filled with a pain that went beyond physical injury. "It's worse than I imagined," he said, his voice a low growl. "The hunters, they're not just trying to kill us. They're trying to control us. They're using the curse to fuel their own power." He looked at Celine, his gaze intense, searching. "The ancient texts, the ones I showed you, they spoke of a ritual, a way to amplify the curse, to bind a lycanthrope's power to a specific object, a conduit. Celine's mind raced.
A conduit?
What kind of object? And where was it hidden? The hunters, Lycaon continued, his voice tight with anger. They have that conduit. They're using it to drain my power, to control my people, to maintain the curse. He clenched his fists, his body trembling with rage. We need to find it, Celine, he said, his voice low and determined. We need to destroy it. It's the only way to break the curse, to free my people, to reclaim my kingdom. Celine nodded, her own determination fueled by Lycaon's passion and by the growing sense of injustice she felt. She was no longer just a bystander, a reluctant participant in this ancient conflict. She was a warrior, a protector, a lover. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She loved Lycaon. Not just admired him, not just felt drawn to him, but truly, deeply loved him. The fear was still there, the uncertainty, but it was overshadowed by the overwhelming power of her love. She reached out and took his hand, her touch sending a jolt of warmth through him. We'll find it, she said, her voice firm, her eyes filled with a love that transcended fear and doubt. We'll find it together. Lycaon looked at her, his silver eyes softening, his gaze filled with a tenderness that made her heart melt. He squeezed her hand, his touch a silent acknowledgement of their bond, of their shared purpose, of their love. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss that was both passionate and tender, a kiss that sealed their commitment to each other, to their cause, to their future. It was a kiss that tasted of midnight rain and ancient magic, of danger and desire, of hope. The kiss was a spark, igniting a fire within them, a fire that burned away the fear, the doubt, the uncertainty. It was a fire of forbidden love, a love that defied the boundaries of species, of curses, of ancient feuds. As they broke apart, breathless, their eyes locked, Celine knew that she was willing to risk everything for Lycaon, for his freedom, for their love. She would face the hunters, she would confront the ancient magic, she would embrace the wolf within, she would do whatever it took to break the curse and reclaim his kingdom. The touch of forbidden flame had ignited within her a power she had never known before, a power fueled by love, by loyalty, by a fierce determination to fight for what was right. And, as she looked into Lycaon's silver eyes, she knew that together, they were unstoppable. The forest, the moon, the very air around them seemed to hum with the power of their connection. The challenge ahead was daunting, but for the first time, Celine felt a glimmer of true hope, a belief that they could, and would, overcome.
Chapter 9.
The Hunter's Pursuit. The kiss, a spark of forbidden flame in the moonlit clearing, left Celine and Lycaon breathless, their connection solidified, their resolve strengthened. But the moment of peace was shattered by the stark reality of their situation. Silas, though unconscious, was a ticking clock, a reminder of the relentless pursuit they faced. We need to move, Lycaon said, his voice low and urgent, his senses on high alert. He pulled away from Celine, his gaze scanning the surrounding forest. He won't be out for long, and he'll have alerted others. Celine nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The exhilaration of the kiss was replaced by a surge of adrenaline, a primal instinct to survive. She was no longer just a bookstore owner, a widow, a woman caught in a supernatural conflict. She was a warrior, a protector, a lover, fighting for her life, for Lycaon's freedom, for their future. They left Silas bound in the clearing, a temporary measure that would buy them some time, but not much. They knew the hunters were relentless, their network vast, their resources seemingly unlimited. They had to be one step ahead, always moving, always watching, always prepared to fight. Lycaon led Celine through the dense forest, his movements swift and silent, his senses attuned to every sound, every scent, every shift in the wind. He knew these woods like the back of his hand, navigating the treacherous terrain with an ease that spoke of centuries of experience. Celine followed close behind, her own senses heightened by her recent transformation experiences. She was learning to trust her instincts, to rely on the wolf within, to embrace the power that flowed through her veins. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "To a place of safety," Lycaon said, his voice low and reassuring. "A place where we can regroup, plan our next move, prepare for what's to come." He didn't elaborate, and Celine didn't press him. She trusted him implicitly, her faith in him unwavering, her love for him a constant source of strength. They traveled for hours, their pace relentless, their bodies pushed to the limits of endurance. The moon began to set, casting long, skeletal shadows from the surrounding trees, and the first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky with hues of pink and orange. As they reached a hidden cave, nestled deep within a rocky outcrop, Lycaon finally stopped. He turned to Celine, his silver eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft, his hand gently touching her cheek. Celine nodded, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was exhausted, her muscles aching, her body covered in sweat and dirt. But she was also alive. And she was with Lycaon. That was all that mattered. "I'm tired," she admitted, her voice a low murmur. "But I'm okay." Lycaon smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You are strong, Celine," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "Stronger than you know." He led her into the cave, a dark, damp space that offered little comfort, but provided a much-needed respite from the relentless pursuit. He lit a small fire, using flint and tinder he carried in a pouch, the flames casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. Celine huddled close to the fire, her body shivering from the cold and exhaustion. Lycaon sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his warmth a comforting presence. "We need to find the conduit," he said, his voice low and serious, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. "It's the only way to break the curse." Celine nodded, her mind racing. She remembered the images Lycaon had seen in Silas's mind, the glimpses of ancient rituals, of secret meetings, of a hidden object that held the key to Lycaon's freedom. "But where do we start?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration.
We have so little to go on.
Lycaon sighed, his expression grim. "We have clues," he said, his voice thoughtful. "Silas's memories, the ancient texts, the whispers of Black Hollow, we need to piece them together, to find the connections, to unravel the mystery." He looked at Celine, his gaze intense, expectant. "We need to use your gift," he said, his voice a silken whisper. "Your connection to the earth, to the ancient magic, to the wolf." Celine's heart skipped a beat. Her gift? He meant her ability to shift, to connect with the primal instincts of the wolf, to sense things that ordinary humans couldn't. She had been afraid of that power, of the wildness it unleashed within her, of the loss of control it represented. But she was learning to embrace it, to trust it, to use it for good. "I'll try," she said, her voice hesitant but determined. Lycaon smiled, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her breath catch in her throat. "I know you will," he said, his voice a soft caress. "I have faith in you, Celine. I believe in you." He leaned in and kissed her, a gentle kiss that was filled with love, with trust, with hope. It was a kiss that reaffirmed their bond, their commitment, their shared destiny. The cave, the fire, the looming threat all faded into the background as they lost themselves in each other, in the promise of a future they were determined to create. The hunter's pursuit was relentless, but so was their love. And, in that moment, love felt like the most powerful magic of all. Chapter 10. Sanctuary in the Ruins. The cave, though a temporary refuge, offered little comfort. The cold seeped into Celine's bones, and the dampness clung to her clothes. Yet, with Lycaon beside her, sharing his warmth and his unwavering determination, she felt a sense of security, a fragile hope that they could overcome the challenges ahead. They spent the day resting, recovering their strength, and poring over the information they had gathered. Lycaon, with his centuries of knowledge, deciphered ancient texts, recalling forgotten lore, piecing together fragments of information from Silas's memories. Celine, with her newly awakened senses, listened to the whispers of the wind, felt the pulse of the earth, searched for any clue that might lead them to the conduit. The conduit, they discovered, was not just an object, but a living artifact, imbued with ancient magic, capable of amplifying and controlling lycanthropic power. It was created centuries ago, during the height of the lycanthrope kingdom, as a symbol of unity, a source of strength. But in the hands of the hunters, it had become a weapon, a tool of oppression, the very instrument of Lycaon's curse. The text spoke of a hidden chamber, a secret sanctuary where the conduit was kept, protected by powerful wards and ancient guardians. The location of the chamber was lost to time, obscured by centuries of deceit and manipulation. But there were clues, whispers of a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where the power of the moon was at its strongest, where the echoes of the past still resonated. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, Celine felt a strange pull, a tingling sensation in her skin, a growing sense of urgency. She closed her eyes, focusing her senses, reaching out with her mind, seeking guidance from the earth, from the moon, from the wolf within. I sense something, she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. A place nearby, a place of power, a place of ruins. Lycaon looked at her, his silver eyes filled with a mixture of hope and anticipation. Ruins? He repeated, his voice thoughtful. There are many ruins in Black Hollow. But he paused, his gaze fixed on Celine, his mind racing. He remembered a place, a forgotten sanctuary, a place he had not visited in centuries, a place that held both fond memories and bitter sorrow. The old cathedral, he said, his voice a low murmur. The one on the cliffs, overlooking the sea. It was built on the site of an even older temple, a place of ancient power, a place where my ancestors worshipped the moon. Celine's heart skipped a beat. The old cathedral.
She knew it well.
It was a local landmark, a crumbling ruin that stood on a windswept cliff, overlooking the crashing waves below. She had often visited it as a child, drawn to its eerie beauty, its sense of history, its atmosphere. I've been there, she said, her voice filled with wonder. It feels different. There's a presence there. Lycaon nodded, his expression grim. It is a place of power, he said, his voice low and serious. But it is also a place of danger. The hunters know of it. They have guarded it for centuries. They will be expecting us. Celine met his gaze, her own determination mirroring his. Then we'll be ready for them, she said, her voice firm, her eyes filled with a fierce resolve. They left the cave under the cover of darkness, the moon their only guide. They moved swiftly and silently, two shadows blending into the night, their hearts pounding in unison, their minds focused on their mission. As they approached the cathedral, Celine felt the air grow heavy, the energy palpable, the sense of ancient power overwhelming. The ruins loomed before them, silhouetted against the moonlit sky, a crumbling testament to a forgotten past. The cathedral was a shell of its former glory, its roof long gone, its walls crumbling, its windows gaping holes that stared out at the sea. But even in its ruined state, it possessed a strange beauty, an eerie grandeur that sent shivers down Celine's spine. They entered the cathedral cautiously, their senses on high alert. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the wind whistling through the broken windows and the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay, and the moonlight cast long, skeletal shadows across the floor, creating an eerie, almost ethereal atmosphere. Celine felt a strange connection to this place, a sense of familiarity, a feeling of belonging. The chamber, it's beneath the altar, Lycaon said, his voice a low murmur, his gaze fixed on the crumbling remains of the once grand structure. They moved towards the altar, their footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. As they approached, Celine felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that spread through her veins, a warning that they were not alone. Suddenly, figures emerged from the shadows, their forms cloaked in darkness, their weapons gleaming in the moonlight. Hunters. Lycaon growled, a low, guttural sound that sent a shiver down Celine's spine. He placed himself between Celine and the hunters, his body tense, ready to fight. The sanctuary was not as safe as they had hoped. It was a trap. But they were ready. Or, so they hoped. The fight for the conduit, for their freedom, for their love, had begun, within the very heart of the ruins, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon. Chapter 11. The Price of Freedom. The hunters, for a number, moved with a practiced efficiency, their faces obscured by shadows, their weapons crossbows and silver-tipped blades reflecting the cold moonlight. They surrounded Celine and Lycaon, blocking their path to the altar, their intent clear, to stop them at any cost. Lycaon stood protectively in front of Celine, his body tense, his silver eyes gleaming with a predatory light. He was a force to be reckoned with, a creature of immense power, centuries of experience honed into a lethal weapon. But Celine was no longer a helpless bystander. She stood her ground, her own senses heightened, her wolf instincts awakened, ready to fight alongside the man she loved. "We don't have to do this," Celine said, her voice surprisingly steady, addressing the hunters. "We just want to break the curse. We don't want to harm anyone." The lead hunter, a tall, imposing figure with a cruel sneer, chuckled. "The curse is your problem, not ours. And you've made yourselves our problem by interfering." "The curse affects everyone," Lycaon interjected, his voice a low growl. "It's a perversion of the natural order, a source of darkness that taints this land. You may think you control it, but you are merely its puppets." The hunter's sneer deepened. "We control what we need to control, and we will not allow you to disrupt our plans." He raised his crossbow, aiming it directly at Lycaon. "Any last words, beast?" Before Lycaon could respond, Celine stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "Leave him alone,"
she cried.
She raised her hands, focusing her will, channeling the power that flowed through her veins. She had practiced the incantations Lycaon had taught her, the ancient words of power that could manipulate the elements, that could summon the forces of nature. A gust of wind, sudden and fierce, swept through the cathedral, extinguishing the hunters' torches, plunging the ruins into near total darkness. The hunters cried out in surprise, their aim disrupted, their formation broken. Lycaon seized the opportunity. He moved with a speed that defied human comprehension, a blur of motion in the darkness. He disarmed two of the hunters, his claws tearing through their weapons, his strength overwhelming. Celine, guided by her heightened senses, focused on another hunter, the one closest to her. She felt the surge of power within her, the primal urge to transform, to unleash the wolf. But she resisted, channeling the energy instead into a defensive shield, a barrier of wind that deflected the hunter's blade. The fight was chaotic, a whirlwind of motion and sound in the darkness. Celine fought with a courage and determination she never knew she possessed, fueled by her love for Lycaon, by her desire to protect him, to break the curse, to reclaim their freedom. But the hunters were skilled, relentless, their weapons designed to kill lycanthropes. One of them managed to break through Lycaon's defenses, his silver-tipped blade grazing Lycaon's arm. Lycaon roared in pain, a sound that was both human and animal, a raw, guttural cry that echoed through the cathedral. Celine's heart clenched with fear. She saw the blood, the silver burning his flesh, weakening him. "Lycaon," she cried, her voice filled with anguish. She turned her fury on the hunter who had wounded him, channeling all her power, all her rage, into a single, focused attack. She unleashed a blast of wind, so powerful that it sent the hunter flying backward, crashing against the stone wall. But the lead hunter, the one with the cruel sneer, had recovered. He raised his crossbow again, aiming it at Celine this time. "You may have some tricks, human," he said, his voice dripping with malice, "but you are no match for us." He released the bolt. Celine closed her eyes, bracing herself for the impact, for the pain, for the end. But the end didn't come. Instead, she heard a roar, a sound of pure rage and protectiveness. She opened her eyes and saw Lycan, his body transformed, his wolf form magnificent and terrifying, standing between her and the hunter, the bolt embedded in his shoulder. He had shielded her, sacrificing himself to save her. Celine's heart shattered. She saw the pain in his eyes, the blood staining his fur, the silver burning his flesh. She felt his love, his unwavering devotion, his willingness to give his life for hers. Tears filled in her eyes. She moved to his side, touching his fur, Lycan. He turned his head to her, his large eyes filled with a message. "Run," he seemed to say. "Save yourself." But she wouldn't. She couldn't. She wouldn't leave him. With renewed resolve, fueled by her love, by her grief, by her rage, Celine faced the remaining hunters. She would fight. She would avenge him. She would break the curse. She would survive. The price of freedom was steep, but she was willing to pay it for Lycan, for herself, for the future they had dreamed of. The cathedral echoed with the sounds of battle, a testament to the enduring power of love and the desperate fight for freedom. Chapter 12. The Heart's Reckoning. The sight of Lycan, wounded and vulnerable, ignited a fire within Celine, a fierce, protective instinct that overrode her fear, her pain, her grief. She would not let him fall. She would not let the hunters win. She would fight with every ounce of her strength, with every fiber of her being, for the man she loved, for the future they deserved. The remaining hunters, though initially surprised by Lycan's transformation and Celine's resilience, regrouped quickly. They were trained, experienced, their weapons and tactics designed to combat werewolves. They knew Lycan's weakness, the silver that burned his flesh, that weakened his power. They would exploit it, relentlessly, ruthlessly. But Celine was no longer the naive, hesitant woman who had first entered Black Hollow. She had embraced the wolf within. She had learned from Lycan. She had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. She was a warrior, a protector, a lover, fueled by a power that transcended fear, that burned with the intensity of 1,000 suns. She moved with a speed and agility that surprised even her senses heightened, her instinct sharpened. She dodged the hunters' attacks, deflecting their blades, anticipating their movements. She used the environment to her advantage, the crumbling walls, the broken pillars, the uneven floor, turning the ruins into her battleground. She channeled the power that flowed through her veins, the ancient magic that Lycan had awakened within her. She summoned gusts of wind to disrupt the hunters' aim. She created barriers of earth to shield herself from their attacks. She unleashed bursts of energy that sent them reeling. But it was not enough. The hunters were too many, too skilled, too determined. They pressed their attack, relentlessly, forcing Celine to retreat, to defend, to protect Lycan, who was weakened by the silver wound. One of the hunters, faster and more agile than the others, managed to slip past Celine's defenses. He lunged at Lycan, his silver-tipped blade aimed at the wolf's heart. Celine screamed, a sound of pure desperation, of anguish, of love. She threw herself in front of Lycan, shielding him with her body, taking the blow that was meant for him. The blade pierced her flesh, a searing pain that ripped through her, stealing her breath, blurring her vision. She felt the silver burning, weakening her, draining her life force. Lycan roared, a sound of pure rage and grief, a sound that shook the very foundations of the cathedral. He lunged at the hunter, his claws tearing through flesh and bone, his fangs sinking into the hunter's throat. The other hunters, seeing their comrade fall, hesitated, their confidence shaken. They had underestimated Celine, underestimated her strength, her courage, her love. Lycan, his wolf form trembling with rage and pain, turned his attention to Celine. He nuzzled her gently, his eyes filled with a sorrow that mirrored her own. He licked her wound, his tongue rough against her skin, trying to ease her pain, to heal her, to save her. Celine looked at him, her vision fading, her body growing cold. She reached out and touched his fur, her hand trembling. "Lycan," she whispered, her voice weak, her breath shallow. She wanted to tell him that she loved him, that she didn't regret her choice, that she would do it all again for him, for their future. But the words wouldn't come. Her eyes closed, her hand fell limp, her body went still. Lycaon howled, a long, mournful cry that echoed through the ruins, a sound of pure grief, of loss, of despair. He had failed. He had lost her. He had lost everything. The remaining hunters, seeing their opportunity, closed in, their weapons raised, ready to finish him off. But Lycaon didn't care. He had nothing left to live for. He welcomed the darkness, the oblivion, the end. But the end didn't come. Instead, he felt a surge of power, a warmth that spread through his veins, a healing energy that mended his wounds, that restored his strength, that revived him. He opened his eyes and saw Celine, her body glowing with a faint, silvery light, her wound healing, her breath returning, her eyes open. She was alive. She had saved herself. Or something had saved her. The hunters gasped, their faces contorted in disbelief, in fear. They had seen something impossible, something that defied their understanding, something that terrified them. Celine rose to her feet, her body stronger, her senses sharper, her power amplified. She was no longer just a human with lycanthropic abilities. She was something more. She looked at the hunters, her eyes gleaming with a fierce, otherworldly light. "You made a mistake," she said, her voice resonating with a power that was not entirely her own. "You hurt him, and now you will pay." The hunters, their courage shattered, their weapons useless against this new, unknown power, turned and fled, disappearing into the darkness. Celine turned to Lycaon, her eyes filled with love, with relief, with wonder. She didn't understand what had happened, how she had survived, how she had healed. But she knew one thing. She was different. She was stronger. She was changed. The heart's reckoning had come, and it had transformed her, revealing a power she never knew she possessed, a power that would change their destiny forever. Lycaon nuzzled her once more, but she could tell the dynamic was shifting. She was no longer his ward to be protected, but his equal in power. And the game, as they knew it, was changing. Chapter 13. Shattered Reflections. The aftermath of the battle left the cathedral shrouded in an eerie silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of Celine and Lycaon, and the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. The air was thick with the scent of blood, sweat, and the lingering residue of magic. Celine, still reeling from the near-death experience and the inexplicable surge of power that had saved her, leaned against Lycaon, his wolf form a comforting presence beside her. "What would happen?" she asked, her voice trembling, her hand reaching up to touch the place where the blade had pierced her. The wound was gone, leaving only smooth, unblemished skin. Lycaon, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and bewilderment, nuzzled her gently. He couldn't explain it either. He had felt her life force ebbing away. He had seen the light fading from her eyes. He had believed she was gone. And then she had returned, stronger, more powerful, radiating an energy that was both familiar and alien. I don't know," he said, his voice a low rumble, his wolf form shifting back to his human shape. He stood before her, naked and vulnerable, his silver eyes searching hers, seeking answers, seeking reassurance. Celine looked at him, her heart aching for the pain she had caused him, for the sacrifice he had made for her. She reached out and touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines of worry around his eyes, the scars that marked his centuries of suffering. "You saved me," she said, her voice filled with gratitude, with love. "You took the blow that was meant for me." Lycaon shook his head, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her breath catch in her throat. "You saved yourself," he said, his voice a soft whisper. "Something within you awakened. Something powerful." He looked at her, his gaze intense, searching. He saw the change in her, the new strength, the otherworldly light that shimmered around her, the aura of ancient magic that had amplified her own. "You are different," he said, his voice tinged with awe, with a hint of fear. Celine nodded, her own feelings mirroring his. She felt different. She felt stronger, more alive, more connected to the world around her, to the ancient power that flowed through her veins. "I don't understand it," she said, her voice shaking. "But I feel like I'm finally whole." She looked down at her hands, her fingers flexing, feeling the energy coursing through them. She felt a connection to the earth, to the moon, to the wolf, a connection that was deeper, stronger, more profound than anything she had experienced before. "The conduit," Lycaon said, his voice suddenly urgent, his gaze shifting to the altar. "We need to find it. We need to break the curse. Before it's too late." He was referring not just to the hunters, but to the change in Celine, to the unknown power that had awakened within her. He feared it, not for himself, but for her. He feared what it might do to her, how it might change her, how it might consume her. They moved towards the altar, their steps hesitant, their minds filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The altar was a crumbling structure of ancient stone, covered in intricate carvings depicting scenes of wolves, humans, and a celestial being that seemed to represent the moon. Lycaon examined the altar, his fingers tracing the carvings, his senses searching for any hidden mechanism, any secret passage, any clue that might lead them to the conduit. Celine, guided by her intuition, her newly awakened senses, focused on the energy of the place, the pulse of the earth, the whispers of the wind. She felt a strong presence beneath the altar, a powerful force that resonated with her own, a connection. "It's here," she said, her voice firm, her eyes filled with a certainty that surprised even her. "It's beneath the altar." Lycaon nodded, his own senses confirming her intuition. He placed his hands on the altar, focusing his will, channeling his power, seeking to unlock the secrets hidden within. The altar trembled, the stone groaning under the force of his magic. A crack appeared, widening into a fissure, revealing a hidden passage, a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the depths of the earth. The air that wafted from the passage was cold, heavy, laden with a scent of ancient magic, of dust and decay, of power. It was a place of secrets, a place of darkness, a place where the fate of their world would be decided. As they prepared to descend, Celine glanced at her reflection in a shard of broken mirror lying on the floor. What stared back was not entirely her. The eyes glowed faintly silver, and an ethereal power seemed to emanate from her very being. The reflection was both beautiful and terrifying, a shattered image of the woman she once was and the powerful being she was becoming. It was a stark reminder of the price of freedom, of the transformations they both had undergone, and of the uncertain path that lay ahead. The shattered reflection was a symbol of their broken past, and a promise of a future yet to be forged. Chapter 14. Whispers of the Ancient Ones. The staircase spiraled downwards, plunging Celine and Lycaon into a darkness so profound it felt like a physical entity. The air grew colder, heavier, pressing in on them with an almost suffocating weight. The only sound was the echo of their footsteps and the occasional drip of water, a constant reminder of the age and decay of this hidden place. Lycaon, his senses heightened by his lycanthropic nature, led the way, his hand protectively on Celine's back, guiding her through the treacherous descent. He could feel the power emanating from below, a palpable force that both attracted and repelled him, a siren song of ancient magic that whispered of both promise and peril. Celine, her own senses amplified by the mysterious transformation she had undergone, felt a growing unease, a sense of being watched, of being judged. The darkness seemed to be alive, filled with unseen presences, with the echoes of forgotten voices, with the whispers of the ancient ones. "This place," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "It feels different. Like we're not alone." Lycaon nodded, his grip tightening on her back. "We are not," he said, his voice low and grave. "This is a sacred place, a place of ancient power, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. The spirits of my ancestors, they linger here." He didn't elaborate, but Celine understood. This was not just a hidden chamber, a secret sanctuary. It was a tomb, a mausoleum, a place where the spirits of the past held sway, where the ancient laws still applied, where the fate of the living was intertwined with the legacy of the dead. As they reached the bottom of the staircase, the passage opened into a vast, circular chamber. The air here was thick with the scent of incense and old magic, and a faint, ethereal glow emanated from the walls, illuminating the space with an otherworldly light. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, and upon the pedestal rested the conduit. It was not what Celine had expected. It was not a grand, imposing artifact, but a simple, unassuming object, a small, silver orb, no larger than her fist, intricately carved with symbols that seemed to shift and change as she watched. But the power that radiated from the orb was undeniable. It pulsed with a life of its own, a heartbeat of ancient magic, a force that both terrified and fascinated her. Lycaon approached the pedestal cautiously, his eyes fixed on the orb, his body tense, his senses on high alert. He could feel the curse within it, the dark magic that had bound him for centuries, the oppressive force that had controlled his people, that had stolen his life. "This is it," he said, his voice a low murmur, his hand reaching out towards the orb, hesitating just inches from its surface. Celine watched him, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that this was the moment of truth, the culmination of their journey, the chance to break the curse, to reclaim his freedom, to forge their future. But as Lycaon's fingers brushed against the orb, a voice echoed through the chamber, a voice that was both ancient and powerful, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once.
Halt!
Celine and Lycaon froze, their bodies tensing, their eyes scanning the chamber, searching for the source of the voice. The air shimmered, and figures began to appear, coalescing from the shadows, their forms ethereal, translucent, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. They were the Ancient Ones, the spirits of Lycaon's ancestors, the guardians of the conduit, the protectors of the ancient laws. They surrounded Celine and Lycaon, their expressions stern, their gazes unwavering, their presence overwhelming. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground," the lead spirit said, his voice resonating with power. "You seek to disrupt the balance, to break the ancient pact, to unleash chaos." Lycaon stepped forward, his head held high, his silver eyes meeting the gaze of the lead spirit. "I seek only to reclaim what is rightfully mine," he said, his voice firm, his tone respectful but defiant. "To break the curse that has bound me, that has oppressed my people, that has perverted the natural order. The curse was placed upon you for a reason," another spirit said, her voice cold, her gaze piercing. "Your power was too great, your ambition too strong, your heart too wild." "I was betrayed," Lycaon countered, his voice tinged with anger, with pain. "My trust was violated, my kingdom stolen, my people enslaved." "The past is the past," the lead spirit said, his voice implacable. "The present is what matters. And the future is uncertain." He turned his gaze to Celine, his eyes narrowing, his expression curious. "You," he said, his voice softer, his tone less hostile. "You are different. You carry the blood of the Ancient Ones, but you are more. You have been touched by something beyond." Celine felt a shiver run down her spine. The spirit was referring to her transformation, to the inexplicable power that had awakened within her, to the mystery that she herself did not understand. I don't know what I am," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes pleading for understanding. "But I know that I love Lycaon, and I want to help him. I want to break the curse." The spirits conferred silently, their ethereal forms shimmering, their gazes flickering between Celine and Lycaon. The fate of the lovers, of the kingdom, of the very balance between worlds, hung in the balance, subject to the judgment of the Ancient Ones. The whispers of the past held the key to the future. Chapter 15. The Dance of Deception. The silence in the chamber stretched, thick with anticipation and the weight of centuries. The ancient spirits, their ethereal forms shimmering in the faint light, seemed to deliberate, their silent communication a mystery to Celine and Lycaon. The fate of their quest, their love, their very lives, hung precariously in the balance, subject to the judgment of these otherworldly beings. Finally, the lead spirit, his eyes glowing with an ancient wisdom, turned to Celine. "You speak of love," he said, his voice resonant, echoing through the chamber. "A powerful force, indeed. But is it enough to overcome the darkness, to break the ancient pact, to restore the balance?" Celine met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a fierce determination, a love that transcended fear, a courage that surprised even her. "It has to be," she said, her voice firm, her tone unwavering. "Love is the strongest magic of all. It's what binds us, what protects us, what gives us hope." The spirit seemed to consider her words, his gaze searching, probing. He looked at Lycaon, his expression softening slightly. He saw the love in Lycaon's eyes, the devotion, the unwavering commitment to Celine, the transformation he had undergone because of her. "The curse was placed upon you, Lycaon," the spirit said, his voice turning to the ancient king, "for a reason. Your power was feared, your ambition distrusted, your heart deemed too wild." "I have learned from my mistakes," Lycaon said, his voice humble, his tone sincere. "I have suffered for my arrogance, my pride, my recklessness. Celine has shown me a different path, a path of balance, of compassion, of love." The spirits conferred again, their silent communication a whirlwind of ethereal energy. Celine felt a growing unease, a sense that they were not being entirely truthful, that there was something hidden, something deceptive. She remembered the images Lycaon had seen in Silas's mind, the glimpses of a hidden order, a conspiracy that reached far beyond the simple feud between hunters and werewolves. The hunters, it seemed, were not merely protectors of humanity, but manipulators, seeking to control supernatural power, to use it for their own selfish purposes. And the ancient spirits, were they truly impartial judges, guardians of the balance? Or were they, too, part of the deception, players in a larger game, their motives unclear? Celine, guided by her intuition, her newly awakened senses, felt a subtle shift in the energy of the chamber, a dissonance, a falsehood. She realized that the spirits were not testing their love, but probing their strength, assessing their power, seeking to exploit them. She decided to play along, to dance to their tune, to uncover their true intentions, to expose their deception. "We are willing to do whatever it takes," she said, her voice strong, her gaze unwavering, meeting the lead spirit's eyes. "We will face any trial, overcome any obstacle, prove our worthiness." The spirit smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down Celine's spine. "Very well," he said, his voice resonant. "There is one final test. A test of your commitment. A test of your love." He gestured towards the conduit, the small, silver orb that pulsed with ancient magic that held the key to Lycaon's freedom. "To break the curse," the spirit said, his voice low and seductive, "you must merge your power with the conduit, become one with its energy, embrace its essence." Celine's heart skipped a beat. Merge with the conduit? Become one with its power? It sounded dangerous, irreversible, a trap. But she saw the flicker of hope in Lycaon's eyes, the yearning for freedom, the trust in her, the love that bound them together. She knew that she had to do it, for him, for their future, for the truth. She stepped forward, her hand reaching out towards the orb, hesitating just inches from its surface. She looked at Lycaon, her eyes seeking his reassurance, his guidance, his consent. Lycaon nodded, his own eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope, of love and trust. He knew the risk, the danger, the potential for disaster. But he believed in her strength, in her power. Celine took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and touched the orb. A surge of energy, raw and untamed, flooded through her, overwhelming her senses, threatening to consume her. She felt the curse, the dark magic that had bound Lycaon for centuries, the oppressive force that had controlled his people, that had stolen his life. But she also felt something else. She felt the power of the Ancient Ones, their knowledge, their wisdom, their deception. She saw the truth. The spirits were not guardians of the balance, but manipulators seeking to control the conduit's power, to use it for their own purposes. They had orchestrated the curse, not to punish Lycan, but to bind him, to control him, to exploit him. And they were trying to do the same to her. Celine, her mind reeling from the revelation, her body trembling with the force of the energy, held on. She would not be controlled. She would not be manipulated. She would not be deceived. She would break the curse. She would free Lycan. She would expose the truth. She would fight. The dance of deception had begun, and Celine was ready to play her part, to turn the tables on the ancient spirits, to reclaim her destiny, to win. Chapter 16. A glimmer of hope. The power of the conduit surged through Celine, a torrent of ancient magic that threatened to overwhelm her, to consume her, to erase her very being. But she held on, anchored by her love for Lycan, by her determination to break the curse, by her fierce will to resist the manipulative influence of the ancient spirits. She saw their deception, their hidden agenda, their desire to control the conduit's power, to use her and Lycan as pawns in their ancient game. They had orchestrated the curse, not to punish Lycan, but to bind him, to exploit his power, to maintain their control. But Celine was not a pawn. She was a queen. She drew on her own strength, her own inner power, the mysterious force that had awakened within her during the battle with the hunters. She felt a connection to the earth, to the moon, to the wolf, a connection that was deeper, stronger, more profound than anything she had experienced before. She channeled that power, that connection, that essence, into the conduit, weaving it into the ancient magic, disrupting the spirit's control, breaking their hold, reclaiming the balance. The chamber trembled, the ethereal forms of the ancient spirits flickering, their expressions contorted in surprise, in anger, in fear. They had underestimated her strength, underestimated her love. "What are you doing?" The lead spirit cried, his voice losing its resonant power, becoming shrill, desperate.
"Stop.
You are disrupting the balance. You are unleashing chaos." "I am restoring the balance," Celine countered, her voice strong, her tone unwavering, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "I am breaking the chains of deception. I am freeing Lycan. I am reclaiming our destiny." She focused her will, her power, her love, on the curse, the dark magic that bound Lycan, that oppressed his people, that perverted the natural order. She unraveled it, strand by strand, dissolving its hold, releasing its grip, freeing the energy. The conduit pulsed, the silver orb glowing brighter, hotter, radiating a power that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Celine felt the curse lifting, the darkness receding, the light returning. Lycan, who had been watching in stunned silence, felt the change. He felt the weight of the curse lifting from his shoulders, the oppressive force that had bound him for centuries dissolving, his power returning, his freedom restored. He looked at Celine, his eyes filled with gratitude, with awe, with love. He saw the strength in her, the courage, the unwavering determination that had saved him, that had freed him, that had changed their destiny. The ancient spirits, their power waning, their deception exposed, began to fade, their ethereal forms dissolving into the shadows, their whispers silenced, their control broken. The chamber grew quiet, the only sound the gentle hum of the conduit, the energy now flowing freely, balanced, restored to its natural state. Celine, exhausted but exhilarated, released her hold on the orb. She stumbled, her legs weak, her body trembling from the exertion. Lycan caught her, his arms wrapping around her, holding her close, his touch gentle, his presence reassuring. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with emotion, his eyes shining with tears. "You broke the curse. You freed me." Celine looked at him, her own eyes filled with tears of joy, of relief, of love. She leaned into his embrace, her body finding comfort in his warmth, her heart finding solace in his presence. "We did it," she corrected, her voice soft, her tone tender.
Together.
They stood there, in the heart of the ancient chamber, surrounded by the lingering echoes of the past, bathed in the gentle glow of the conduit, their love a beacon of hope, a testament to their strength, a promise of a future finally free. The curse was broken. Lycaon was free. Their destiny was theirs to create. As they held each other, a single ray of moonlight pierced through a crack in the ceiling, illuminating them in a silvery glow. It was a glimmer of hope, a sign of a new dawn, a blessing from the very moon that had witnessed their struggles, their sacrifices, their triumph. The long night was over. A new day had begun. A day filled with possibilities, with challenges, with love. Chapter 17. The Edge of Forever. With the curse broken and the ancient spirits vanquished, a sense of profound peace settled over Selene and Lycaon. They stood in the heart of the hidden chamber, the silver orb of the conduit pulsing gently on its pedestal, a symbol of their hard-won victory, a testament to their unwavering love. Lycaon, his silver eyes filled with a depth of emotion Selene had never seen before, gently cupped her face in his hands. "You saved me, Selene," he said, his voice a husky whisper, his thumbs tracing the delicate curve of her cheekbones. "You saved us all." Selene leaned into his touch, her own eyes mirroring his love, his gratitude, his relief. "We saved each other," she corrected, her voice soft, her smile radiant. "We did it together." They shared a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a kiss that sealed their bond, that celebrated their freedom, that promised a future filled with endless possibilities. It was a kiss that tasted of ancient magic, of midnight rain, of forever. As they broke apart, breathless, their eyes locked, Selene felt a surge of something. A connection, a power, a vision. She saw glimpses of the future, images flickering through her mind, scenes of Lycaon's people returning to Black Hollow, of the land flourishing once more, of a kingdom restored, of a balance regained. She also saw challenges, obstacles, threats that still loomed, forces that would seek to disrupt their newfound peace, to exploit their power, to steal their happiness. But she saw something else, too. She saw strength, resilience, courage, a love that would endure, a bond that could not be broken, a future they would face together. "It's not over," she said, her voice serious, her gaze unwavering, meeting Lycaon's eyes. "There will be other battles, other challenges. But we'll be ready." Lycaon nodded, his expression grim but determined. He knew that the breaking of the curse was just the beginning, that the world was still a dangerous place, that their enemies were still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. "We will face them together," he said, his voice firm, his tone resolute. "We will protect our people, we will defend our land, we will build a better future." They left the hidden chamber, hand in hand, their steps lighter, their hearts filled with hope, their spirits renewed. They climbed the winding staircase, emerging from the darkness into the soft glow of the pre-dawn sky. The cathedral, a crumbling ruin silhouetted against the horizon, seemed to stand taller, prouder, as if imbued with a newfound sense of purpose, a rebirth. As they walked away from the ruins, hand in hand, Selene felt a deep connection to the land, to the earth beneath her feet, to the wind in her hair, to the wolf within. She was no longer just a woman who had stumbled into a supernatural world. She was a part of it, a guardian, a protector, a lover. She was Selene Vex, and she was free. They returned to Lycaon's cave, their temporary sanctuary, their refuge from the world. They needed to rest, to recover, to plan. But as they lay down together, wrapped in each other's arms, Selene couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation. The future was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril, but one thing was clear. They would face it together. They would build a new kingdom, a new world, a new life. They would love, they would laugh, they would live. As the sun began to rise, Casting a golden glow over the horizon, Selene and Lycaon stood at the edge of the forest, looking out at the valley below. Black Hollow, once a place of whispers and shadows, of fear and despair, seemed to shimmer with a newfound light, a promise of hope. They stood on the edge of forever, their love a beacon in the darkness, their strength a shield against the storm, their destiny intertwined. The journey had been long, arduous, filled with pain and sacrifice, but it had led them here, to this moment, to this beginning. And as they looked out at the world, hand in hand, their hearts beating as one, they knew that they were ready. Ready for whatever the future held. Ready for anything. The edge of forever was not an ending, but a beginning. A beginning filled with love, with hope, with endless possibilities. The whispers of Black Hollow had turned into a song of triumph, a melody of freedom, a testament to the enduring power of love. The future stretched before them, unwritten, unknown, but brimming with the promise of a shared destiny, a love that would conquer all. Chapter 18. The Wolf's Embrace. The days following the breaking of the curse were a time of transition, of healing, of rebuilding. Selene and Lycaon, their bond strengthened by their shared ordeal, worked tirelessly to prepare for the return of Lycaon's people, to restore Black Hollow to its former glory, to create a safe haven for those who had been forced into hiding for centuries. Lycaon, freed from the oppressive weight of the curse, was a changed man. The darkness that had clouded his spirit, the bitterness that had consumed him, had dissipated, replaced by a newfound hope, a renewed sense of purpose, a deep and abiding love for Selene. He used his knowledge, his experience, his power to guide his people, to teach them, to protect them. He was a leader, a king, a lover. Selene, too, was transformed. The mysterious power that had awakened within her during the battle with the hunters had not faded. It had become a part of her, integrated into her being, enhancing her senses, amplifying her abilities, making her more than human. She embraced her new self, her newfound strength, her connection to the wolf within. She learned to control her powers, to harness them for good, to protect those she loved. She was a guardian, a protector, a queen. Their love deepened, growing stronger with each passing day, a bond that transcended species, that defied the boundaries of the natural and supernatural worlds, that anchored them to each other. They spent their days working side by side, planning, organizing, preparing for the future. They spent their nights wrapped in each other's arms, sharing their hopes, their fears, their dreams. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the forest, Lycaon took Selene to a hidden clearing, a place he had not visited in centuries. It was a beautiful, secluded spot, surrounded by ancient trees, a small waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. "This was my favorite place," he said, his voice soft, his eyes filled with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. Before the curse, before everything changed. Selene looked around, her heart touched by the beauty of the place, by the sense of peace that permeated the air. She could feel the ancient magic here, the whispers of the past, the presence of Lycaon's ancestors. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice a whisper, her hand reaching out to touch a delicate wildflower that grew near the edge of the pool. Lycaon smiled, his gaze fixed on Selene, his eyes filled with love. "It is," he agreed, "but not as beautiful as you." Selene blushed, her heart fluttering at his words, at the intensity of his gaze. She had never considered herself beautiful, especially not in the conventional sense. She was a woman of a certain age, her face marked by the passage of time, her body bearing the scars of life. But Lycaon saw something else in her. He saw her strength, her courage, her inner beauty. He saw the woman he loved, the woman who had saved him, the woman who had changed his life. He stepped closer, his hands reaching out to gently cup her face. "You are the most beautiful creature I have ever known, Selene," he said, his voice a husky whisper, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. Inside and out. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss that was both tender and passionate, a kiss that expressed the depth of his love, his gratitude, his devotion. It was a kiss that tasted of ancient magic, of midnight rain, of forever. As they broke apart, breathless, their eyes locked, Celine felt a surge of something. A connection, a power, a longing. She looked at Lycaon, her eyes filled with a desire that mirrored his own. She wanted him, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. She wanted to embrace the wolf within, to merge with him, to become one with him, to experience the fullness of their love. Lycaon, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, her hand reaching out to touch his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palm. I want Lycaon understood. He saw the desire in her eyes, the longing in her touch, the invitation in her soul. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. I know, he said, his voice a low murmur, his eyes darkening with passion. He took her hand, leading her to a soft patch of moss beneath a towering oak tree. The moonlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on their bodies, creating an atmosphere of intimacy, of magic. He undressed her slowly, reverently, his fingers tracing the curves of her body, his gaze lingering on every inch of her skin. Celine, her inhibitions melting away under his touch, his gaze, his love, did the same for him. They stood before each other, naked and vulnerable, their bodies bathed in the soft moonlight, their hearts beating as one. Lycaon reached out and gently touched the crescent-shaped mark on her shoulder, the mark of the wolf, the symbol of their bond. You are mine, Celine, he said, his voice a husky whisper, his eyes filled with a possessive love that both thrilled and comforted her. And I am yours. He leaned down and kissed her, a kiss that was deep, passionate, consuming. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her to the soft moss, laying her down gently, his body covering hers. They made love under the watchful gaze of the moon, their bodies intertwined, their souls merging, their love a force that transcended the boundaries of the physical world. It was a union of human and wolf, of ancient magic and modern love, of two hearts beating as one. The wolf's embrace was not just a physical act, but a spiritual connection, a merging of souls, a completion. It was a celebration of their love, their freedom, their destiny. And, as they lay together, exhausted but exhilarated, their bodies intertwined, their hearts filled with a love that would last forever, they knew that they had found something truly special, something sacred. Chapter 19. A Kingdom Reclaimed. The return of Lycaon's people to Black Hollow was a gradual, cautious process. After centuries of living in hiding, scattered across the globe, fearful of discovery and persecution, they were hesitant to trust, reluctant to believe that the curse was truly broken, that they could finally return home. Lycaon, with Celine by his side, worked tirelessly to reach out to them, to reassure them, to invite them back. He sent emissaries, dispatched messages, used his own powerful presence to convince them that Black Hollow was once again a safe haven, a place where they could live freely, openly, without fear. Slowly, tentatively, they began to return. Individuals, families, small groups, drawn by the promise of a new beginning, by the hope of a reunited community, by the legend of their king, restored to his rightful place. The arrival of each new group was a celebration, a moment of joy and relief, a testament to the enduring power of hope, of community, of love. Celine, her heart overflowing with compassion and empathy, welcomed them with open arms, offering them comfort, support, a sense of belonging. She became a mother figure to many, a confidant, a friend, a queen in her own right. She used her knowledge, her experience, her newly awakened powers, to help them heal, to adapt, to rebuild their lives. Black Hollow, once a place of whispers and shadows, began to transform. The crumbling ruins were slowly restored, new homes were built, fields were cultivated, the forest came alive. The sound of laughter, of children playing, of wolves howling under the full moon, filled the air, replacing the silence of fear, the whispers of despair, the echoes of the past. Lycaon, his leadership skills honed by centuries of struggle and survival, guided his people with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering determination. He established a council, a governing body composed of representatives from different clans, ensuring that all voices were heard, that all needs were met, that justice prevailed. He worked to rebuild the ancient traditions, to restore the balance between the human and wolf natures, to create a society that was both strong and compassionate, both powerful and peaceful. Selene, by his side, was his constant advisor, his confidant, his lover. She helped him navigate the complexities of leadership, the challenges of rebuilding a kingdom, the ever-present threat of their enemies. She used her connection to the earth, to the moon, to the wolf, to sense danger, to anticipate threats, to protect their people. Their love, a beacon of hope in the darkness, inspired their people, gave them strength, encouraged them to believe in a better future. One day, as Selene and Lycaon stood on the cliffs overlooking the valley, watching the sun set over the newly revitalized Black Hollow, they saw a large group of werewolves approaching. It was the largest group yet, led by an elder lycanthrope, a woman named Anya, who had been a close friend and advisor to Lycaon's father. Anya, her silver hair braided with intricate patterns, her eyes filled with a mixture of weariness and hope, approached Lycaon and Selene. She knelt before Lycaon, her head bowed in respect. "My king," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We have returned. We have come home." Lycaon, his own eyes filled with tears, helped her to her feet. He embraced her, a gesture of welcome, of gratitude, of forgiveness. "Welcome home, Anya," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Welcome home, all of you." He turned to Selene, his hand reaching out to take hers. "This," he said, his voice strong and clear, addressing the assembled werewolves, "is Selene Vex. She is my queen. She is the one who broke the curse. She is the one who saved us all." The werewolves cheered, their voices echoing through the valley, a sound of joy, of relief, of triumph. They had reclaimed their kingdom. They had found their home. They had found their future. Selene, her heart swelling with pride and love, smiled at Lycaon. Their journey had been long and arduous, filled with pain and sacrifice, but it had led them here, to this moment, to this victory. A kingdom reclaimed, a love fulfilled, a destiny realized. The whispers of Black Hollow had become a song of celebration, a melody of hope, a testament to the enduring power of love and the unwavering strength of the human and wolf spirit. But even in that moment of joy, she felt a pang. They had built this. But it was only the beginning. There was still much work ahead. Chapter 20. The Final Confrontation of Hearts. The rebuilding of Black Hollow was a testament to the resilience and determination of Lycaon's people, a symbol of hope and renewal after centuries of darkness and despair. But the peace they had achieved was fragile, threatened by the lingering shadows of the past, by the enemies who still lurked in the darkness. The hunters, though defeated in their previous encounters, had not vanished. They had retreated, regrouped, reorganized, their hatred for lycanthropes fueled by their centuries-old vendetta, their desire for power undiminished. They were led by a new leader, a ruthless and ambitious man named Marius, a descendant of Silas, the hunter Lycaon had confronted in the ruins. Marius was driven by a burning desire for revenge, a thirst for power, a determination to eradicate the werewolves once and for all. He had spent years studying the ancient texts, searching for a way to counter Lycaon's power, to exploit Selene's newly awakened abilities, to regain control. He had discovered a secret, a hidden truth about the conduit, a vulnerability that he believed he could exploit. He knew that the conduit, while a source of immense power, was also linked to the life force of the one who had merged with it. If he could sever that link, if he could destroy the conduit, he could not only weaken Lycaon, but also kill Selene. He planned his attack carefully, choosing a time when Lycaon and Selene would be most vulnerable, a time when they would be celebrating their newfound peace. The annual Moon Festival, a traditional lycanthrope celebration held under the full moon, was the perfect opportunity. It was a time of joy, of unity, of vulnerability. As the festival approached, Celine felt a growing unease, a sense of impending danger, a premonition of a coming storm. She tried to warn Lycan, but he, caught up in the preparations, in the joy of his people, in his love for her, dismissed her concerns. "It's just nerves, my love," he said, his voice soothing, his hand gently caressing her cheek. "We're safe here. We are strong. We have nothing to fear." But Celine knew better. She had seen the darkness in Marius's eyes. She had felt the hatred that burned within him. She had sensed the danger that loomed. On the night of the festival, as the full moon bathed Black Hollow in its silvery light, as the werewolves gathered to celebrate their freedom, their unity, their future, Marius launched his attack. He and his hunters, armed with silver weapons and ancient artifacts, infiltrated the celebration, their movements swift and silent, their intent deadly. They struck without warning, their attack brutal and efficient. They targeted Lycan, seeking to isolate him, to weaken him, to kill him. But Lycan, his senses heightened by his lycanthropic nature, was ready for them. He fought with a ferocity born of centuries of struggle, of a burning desire to protect his people, of a love that transcended all else. Celine, her own powers amplified by the full moon, fought alongside him, her courage unwavering, her determination fierce. She used her connection to the earth, to the moon, to the wolf, to defend herself, to protect Lycan, to fight for their future. The battle was fierce, a clash of ancient magic and modern weaponry, of love and hate, of hope and despair. Marius, his eyes burning with hatred, confronted Celine. "You cannot win," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "I have found the way to destroy you, to destroy him, to end your reign of terror." He raised his hand, revealing a small, obsidian dagger, its blade shimmering with an unnatural darkness. "This," he said, his voice triumphant, "is the key to your destruction. It is infused with the essence of the conduit's shadow. It can sever your link, shatter your power, and kill you both." Celine's heart clenched with fear. She knew that Marius was telling the truth. She felt the power of the dagger, the dark magic that emanated from it, the threat it posed. But she would not surrender. She would not let him win. She would fight for Lycan, for her people, for their love. She faced Marius, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, her body radiating a power that was both terrifying and beautiful. "You may have the dagger," she said, her voice strong and clear, her tone defiant. "But you do not have the heart. You do not have the love. And that is where your power fails." She unleashed a blast of energy, a force so powerful that it sent Marius reeling backward, his dagger flying from his grasp. Lycan, seeing his opportunity, seized the moment. He lunged at Marius, his claws tearing through flesh and bone, his fangs sinking into the hunter's throat. The battle was over. Marius was dead. The hunters were defeated. Black Hollow was safe. But Celine, weakened by the encounter, by the dark magic of the dagger, collapsed to the ground. Lycan rushed to her side, his heart filled with a fear he had never known before. He gathered her into his arms, his tears falling onto her face. "Celine," he cried, his voice choked with anguish. "Stay with me.
Please, don't leave me."
Celine looked at him, her eyes filled with love, with peace, with acceptance. She had fought her final battle. She had won. But the price was steep. "I love you, Lycan," she whispered, her voice weak, her breath shallow. "Always and forever." Her eyes closed, her hand fell limp, her body went still. Lycan howled, a long, mournful cry that echoed through the night, a sound of pure grief, of loss, of despair. He had lost her. He had lost everything. But then something miraculous happened. The full moon, which had been hidden behind clouds, suddenly emerged, bathing Black Hollow in its silvery light. And Celine began to glow. Her body shimmered, her wounds healed, her breath returned, her eyes opened. She was alive. She had been saved, not by magic, not by power, but by love. The love that bound her to Lycan, the love that flowed through her veins, the love that was her very essence. Lycan, his heart overflowing with joy, with relief, with gratitude, held her close, his tears now tears of happiness. "You came back," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You came back to me." Celine smiled, her eyes shining with a love that would last forever. "I told you," she whispered, "always and forever." The final confrontation of hearts had ended, not in tragedy, but in triumph. Love had conquered all. And Black Hollow, once a place of whispers and shadows, was now a beacon of hope, a testament to the enduring power of love, a kingdom reclaimed, a destiny fulfilled. They had chosen love in the face of darkness, and love had saved them. And that love, stronger than any curse, any magic, any hatred, would be their guiding light forever. Epilogue. Years passed, turning into decades, and the whispers of Black Hollow faded into legend, replaced by the laughter of children, the howling of wolves under the full moon, and the song of a thriving kingdom. Celine and Lycan, their love a beacon of hope, ruled their people with wisdom, compassion, and unwavering devotion. They had faced many challenges, overcome many obstacles, but their bond had remained unbroken, their love eternal. Celine, though her human years advanced, retained a youthful vitality, a sparkle in her eyes, a magic that seemed to defy time. The mysterious power that had awakened within her had not faded, but had become a part of her, enhancing her senses, amplifying her abilities, making her ageless. She was a queen, a guardian, a lover, her heart forever intertwined with Lycan's, her soul bound to the land, to the wolf within. Lycan, freed from the curse, had embraced his destiny, leading his people with strength, courage, and a deep and abiding love for Celine. He was a king, a protector, a partner, his life a testament to the enduring power of hope, of redemption, of love. They had children, both human and lycanthrope, who inherited their parents' strength, their courage, their magic. They grew up in a world of peace and prosperity, a world where humans and werewolves lived in harmony, a world where love reigned supreme. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over Black Hollow, Celine and Lycan, their hair now silvered with age, but their eyes still shining with love, stood on the cliffs overlooking the valley. They watched their grandchildren playing in the fields below, their laughter echoing through the air, a sound that filled their hearts with joy, with contentment. "We did it, my love," Lycan said, his voice soft, his hand reaching out to take Celine's. "We built a better world." Celine smiled, her eyes meeting his, her heart overflowing with love. "We did," she agreed, her voice filled with emotion. Together, they stood there, hand in hand, their bodies leaning against each other, their souls intertwined, their love a beacon in the twilight. They had faced darkness, they had overcome adversity, they had found their forever. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Celine looked at Lycan, her eyes filled with a love that had endured the test of time, a love that had conquered all, a love that was eternal. "Always and forever," she whispered, her voice a promise, a vow, a truth. Lycan smiled, his eyes mirroring her love, his heart echoing her words. "Always and forever," he replied, his voice a whisper in the night, a testament to their enduring bond, a promise of a love that would last beyond the edge of time. They turned and walked back towards their home, their figures silhouetted against the starlit sky, two lovers who had found their destiny, who had built a kingdom, who had found their forever. The whispers of Black Hollow had become a song of love, a melody of hope, a legacy that would endure for generations to come. And as the moon rose high above the valley, bathing the land in its silvery light, it seemed to whisper a blessing, a benediction, a promise of eternal love. The story had